Howdy folks, welcome to Anatomy for Blu-ray. In this video we're talking about Kino Lorber's release of... Is it Kino? Is it just... I'm pretty sure it's Kino Lorber. Yeah, Kino Lorber. It just says KL Studios on the side. Their release of Killdozer. Didn't get the slipcover release, didn't even know there was one. This was available at... I probably the only copy at Minotaur in Melbourne, which was funny for me, because if you know anything about this release, there's an audio commentary track on it, which, for once, I will say, for the first of all of my Anatomy for Blu-rays, I listened to the commentary track. I actually watched all the special features except for looked at the image gallery and the trailers, because the trailers were basically for films that Kino has also done, 4 trailers in particular, and image gallery, I just watched the film twice. I don't really care to look at an image gallery, but nevertheless, I picked this up and I was like, because I saw this cover, and immediately I'm like, it's about a bulldozer that kills people, isn't it? And I was just like, I didn't read any of the description. I was just like, it's Region A, I can play it, it's 1974, so I'm like, okay, post-Duel, so it might be very Duel-inspired. And of course it says Clint Walker on the front, of course, so packaging-wise, very simple stuff. Yeah, and so, it's a very simple case. And the Kino disc, of course. But I picked it up and I was looked at a book as well, and while I was looking at the book, the guy who was running the store at the time came up to me. He's like, so which one did you pick up? And I'm like, Killdozer. And he's like, that's a great one. It's got a great audio commentary. I'm like, oh, okay. And I looked at it and it says audio commentary by film historian Lee Gambin. That's the guy. I started laughing. My friend Pierre, he's just like, what's going on? I'm like, Lee did the commentary on this one. So, yeah, if you've ever noticed, and I've done other videos before, I don't think I've done any with Lee's commentary track in it before, but I've done, collection videos and whatever, and I've had Blu-rays, imprint, whatever, and I've mentioned how Lee Gambin has done some film commentaries. He's a local that I know. As well as film critic Jarrett Gahan. I didn't hear how he pronounced his surname, but he's from Monsterfest. I haven't actually met him personally, but yeah, just one of the guys at Monsterfest, which is always fun. I like Monsterfest. So let's dive into this package, because I figured, look, I bought it 2 days ago. Actually, I bought it yesterday. I figured I should actually watch it. So, packaging-wise, yeah, very stock standard stuff. Of course, it does scream the relevant stuff. Look, new 2K remaster, there's all your special features, all the details that you need to know, if you need to know them, that kind of jam. Do you want to know what this film's about? It's about a construction crew on an island off of Africa that hit a meteorite that has an alien entity thingy that infects the bulldozer, and the bulldozer starts killing people. It's basically it, but like, where most people would expect this to be more like the slasher films of the 80s, or like Christine, where it would go around killing multiple people, or would like relate to a particular person, so someone who's driving it or whatever, and it's like, oh, kill the bullies, kill your parents, that kind of bullshit. It's like, no, it's not like Christine. It's uniquely different, which I like, because that at least allows Christine to be its own film and of course book. And it's similar to Duel as well, which came out like 2 years earlier, I think. Oh, I'm pretty sure that's 1972. Anyway, so Duel, of course, the Spielberg's first theatrical release. Technically, like, it came out theatrically after it was popular on TV. So, yeah, this basically takes the avenue of, you've only got a small crew of, like, 5 people, 6 people, and they do die one by one, not in very explicit or graphic ways, because this is a made-for-TV movie by Universal, which was very big in the early 70s. It's more of a character journey in a way, like seeing these guys hang out, kind of getting an idea of like what the hell they're going to do to survive. Like, it's very like straight-laced in a way. It's not, oh look, it's a killdozer, it's going to kill. Like, again, I specifically referenced the 80s slasher films because this is very much not like any of the 80s slasher films, which I think is interesting because a lot of people who do watch this kind of, I think, expect it to be like that. despite the fact that people who originally watched it when it came out didn't like it anyway. So, it's a cult classic in this case. But I liked it. I liked it. It was a slow pace. It's, again, 74 minutes long, so, it's not crazy. The kills are still fun. There's still some explosions. There's some great camera work. And I guess I should talk about the video itself. Let's talk about the video and audio. It's a 2K remaster. It's on I believe it's a BD25 disc, which would make sense because it's 2K doesn't really need a larger disc size. From the technical specs that I know of, it's a BD25. It's Region A locked. It is 1.3.7 to 1, so it's basically a 4:3 aspect ratio. Because again, it's made for TV. Like, immediately when that popped up, I'm like, this reminds me too much of Duel. So, even though Duel does have an alternate format where you can watch it in widescreen, because there is a cinematic version of it, I usually prefer watching it in 4:3. Anyway, that's just the me thing. It's still 1920 by 1080p, which is very interesting that it notes that, despite the fact that it's, a letterboxed aspect ratio, but still. The 2K transfer is spectacular. Like, it's a low-budget film as it is, but it looks really, really good. Like, it's all the shots are set during the day, most of the time, or if they're set at night, even the blacks are crisp, but, like, you can tell when it's going nighttime. It feels very natural and progressive. It just looks really goddamn sharp. There's a lot of good close-ups as well. There's some great camera shots, get great camera angles. The visuals for the Killdozer, there's the special effects are basically like rotoscoped, which I listened to the audio commentary, so I know how they did it now. They have this like blue light effect that goes on the media, goes onto the front of the Killdozer. See that thingy there? Yeah, that basically is what becomes possessed. And so whenever that glows blue, basically what they did was instead of, coloring each of the 24 frames per second, they would just copy the same frame and just basically paste it for like 3 seconds long. So it'll be the exact same frame, just with slight variations of its color. So hence the kind of rotoscoping where this second of frame is like, or like this half second is a slight blue, then the other one's a light darker blue, then it just kind of changes. That's totally how rotoscoping works. I know my stuff. I've watched that Richard Linklater film. Anyway, low budget effects, but good enough for what it is. The sound effects too are also quite kooky. Like, at first, when they first started going off, I was like, okay, that's kind of weird. But then when it becomes the Killdozer, it has the added effect of the Killdozer sound effects, the bulldozer sound effects, which I think makes it work better. It makes it sound more like a mean monster that just happens to have an alien entity technically in it, because the opening scene is a meteorite, which is a practical like rock prop that they use going down and landing on Earth, very much like the opening of The Thing, the John Carpenter version. It's great, that's already a great visual effect. It lands on this island, and then cut to this construction crew who are just working there. Audio-wise, don't think it stipulates what kind of audio it has. I think it was like just a mono 2.0. It sounded fine, very TV budget as well, so if you had loud noises like when they operated both the trucks at the same time whilst the guy was talking to the guy in front of him, obviously the trucks are really loud. There are times where the audio isn't perfect for how the people are talking. I think later in the film it gets better, like from what I remember, but there are definitely earlier parts in the film where the audio just isn't perfect. Like, it's just that kind of low budget effect, which I think still works. Like, it's not like it's overblown with wind or anything. It's just got this density to it that's a bit different. Mostly for the main character, actually, this guy being Clint Walker. So it's interesting. It's not bad though. I liked it. I think it worked for the effect that it was going for, especially when you had the extra special effects and stuff for sound work and even musical score and soundtrack for later in the film. The score sounded great. I didn't really notice the score. Like, it was there. It carried the movie of the film. And it wasn't until the main credits, the main menu hit again, that it's like plays like the main theme, and it reminded me, I'm like, oh yeah, there was music in that film, because sometimes consciously I'm not really realizing it's there, but subconsciously it's there. So I think as an audio and picture wise, it definitely looks fantastic, and it sounds pretty good. I'd say that the audio is probably the weakest part of it, of the package, but it's not too bad. I guess, of course, we will get into special features, given that that's basically all the additional stuff. There is subtitles. It just says English subtitles, so I guess if you have problems hearing what they're saying, then go for it, chuck on the English subtitles. I didn't personally put them on because it was fine for me. So I listened to the audio commentary with film historian Lee Gambin and film critic Jarrett Gahan. Yeah, I'm just going to say Gahan. I don't know, Gahan. Nevertheless, I listened to it, and it was an interesting style of audio commentary. I've listened to a few audio commentaries before. Recently, I listened to the Dracula 4K one, which basically was the IMDb trivia track, just read out to me as it was happening. So that's one style. You have another style where you've got like two people talking about what's happening in the film and stuff like that, and relating it to other stuff or whatever. In this case, these two had both filmed their stuff separately. I mean, to be fair, this came out in like 2020, so from what I can understand is that they were literally having to everyone was isolating, so they were like, oh, we'll record this stuff at our homes, and you can tell from quality of microphones and stuff. In this case, Jarrett's audio was perfect. No offense to Lee's, of course. It's the kind of mic where you kind of need a pop filter, but outside of that, they both have different ways of talking about stuff. Like, it's opened by Jarrett, and then Lee jumps in and he talks about his own stuff, but they're not in the same room, they're not talking to each other, they're just doing their own, like, obviously recorded separate intervals, and they've just, cut it in post, as in when they've done the processing for this. And for what it's worth, it works. Like, they both talk about specific things in their own individual segments. Lee especially talking about his, like, in-depth knowledge of, like, TV movies, because it's one of his favorite genres. Like, just all this stuff, knowing, like, oh, this actor went and did this, there's this whole part here is talking about this, and, like, he'll go on a tangent about this whole stuff, but, like, he's obviously balanced it out enough to know when to stop talking about it to start talking about another thing. One of those things where it's like, you'd basically write out a script and just read from the script, but for him, he just makes it sound more natural. Like, he's just talking about stuff to the point of he will, like, and or he will, like, say the same word twice, and, like, say it once, and then, like, say it a second time as he's continuing the actual sentence. So his way of doing an audio commentary sounds more naturalistic. It doesn't personally sound as, like, professional or neat and tidy, say, as Jarrett's was, but at the same time, I think I got more out of Lee's. Maybe it was because I was paying more attention to it, but at the same time, I mean, I was on my phone whilst having the movie play a second time, so I wasn't actually watching the visuals, but the audio commentary never applied to the visuals on screen, which is maybe my only criticism of a kind of commentary like that. But at the same time, it's more or less talking about the style of film and what's it similar to, and what the actors did, and all this kind of stuff, and what the director did. So it's more, again, the film historian perspective. It's, again, even Jarrett's is the film critic perspective, so he talked about, like, the audience reception, what people thought of this kind of stuff, so it's interesting. It's definitely interesting to listen to. I definitely would recommend it, given how it's the only audio commentary on the whole film. I don't like how Kino wraps their plastic around the covers, because it, like, leaves all this dirt and gunk and shit. I hate it. Anyway, that might just be how they've... But yeah, so for the most part, I'll say the audio commentary was very interesting. It's a different style of audio commentary than I'm used to. I've listened to, again, a few film historian versions of, audio commentaries, but most of them just read out, like, an IMDb trivia track, whereas Lee's sounded more like, oh, it's kind of like an IMDb trivia track, but it's so, like, far away from the film that it's like, I just know all this shit, and it's, like, interesting to the point of it's all relevant. I don't play trivia games myself, but I know that is one of the topics in one of those trivia games, nevertheless. But I did like both of their discussions. I think my only criticism basically would be that with Lee's mic, but it might have been a situation because he was, like, doing it at home or whatever, because it's 2020, or at least it was when they did this. I don't know. That might be the case. I don't know. I can ask him about it. Probably. I probably will. But I do have a few other, like, for imprint and stuff, so I could always just look at them and see if there's any difference. I did also listen to the audio interview with director Jerry London. That actually was with Lee as well. It's basically like a 22-minute thing where it's on the phone, and Lee's very clear, and you can hear everything he's saying. Jerry is clearly, this is him on the phone kind of deal, so budgeted to a degree, but it basically does what I wanted the audio commentary to do, where it actually broke down elements of Jerry talking about what it was working on the film, how they did achieve certain effects and stuff like this, and it was basically just Lee asking him certain questions like, oh, how, like, what was it like doing the rotoscoping, and how did you manage to pull off doing the Killdozer effects when there was no one driving it, and all this kind of stuff. Like, all the magic behind the film was basically revealed, like, what was it like filming for, like, the certain amount of days, and all this kind of stuff. Like, it was very professionally conducted. I very much enjoyed it. It basically just had one still shot of the two main characters over the top, so visually nothing much there, but audio, it's all there. It can be a bit hard to hear what Jerry's saying, but to be fair, it's him talking on a phone, and you're hearing it from that phone speaker, so it is what it is. But for the most part, it was actually really interesting. For like 20 minutes, I think it was definitely... I'd say it's probably the better of the two special features because it's more specifically about the experience of making the film, but at the same time the audio commentary was still quite nice. And yeah, that's basically all I can really say about this. It feels weird to like kind of be like a little critical of what I think of something that someone I know has done. And to be fair, I don't know Lee a lot. I've been to cinema nights with him and stuff like that. Like, we're not personal friends, but I do plan to interview him eventually for my interview show, which he's happy to do, which is great. So, like, and it's like him and I have very similar tastes in film and all kinds of literature, so it's just kind of cool, you know. It's because of him that I've discovered a lot of very, like, specifically 70s movies, I think, just as a general. So I think a few 80s ones as well, but yeah, like, overall, would I suggest Killdozer as a film? Yeah, I think if you go into it with a different kind of mindset, because I was just, like, completely, like, I know that there's a bulldozer that kills people, I don't know the style it's going to go for, but immediately when the title credits popped up, I'm like, Jewel. Like, it's just the first thing that came to mind, and it was like, that's kind of, I think, the direction it went for, and it worked. It definitely worked, being in that, like, this is what I'm going to expect, and that's exactly what I expected. Slow-paced, you know, kills aren't over the top, and it's good. I enjoyed it. Special features were good. Packaging, generic but fine. Definitely a worthwhile purchase if you're interested in that kind of film, or if you can stream this kind of transfer. Outside of that, that's all for now. Thanks for watching this Anatomy of a Blu-ray for Killdozer. And see you next time. Adios.